life living and making a living can sometimes wear us out, grind us down, and dull our senses. So for a keen mind and a sharp contributive edge that can make it all easier and better and more productive, let's take some time to sharpen our axe. Stay with us right now for Life Talk.
Hello, I'm Gina Fitt. Welcome to another in our ongoing series of verbal essays brought to you in this television format. This is Life Talk. Bern, we've been talking about so many different things over the past few months and even over the course of the past year, and we've had a lot of people call in and ask us about relationships. And we've talked about life, living, and making a living, and maybe we could spend a few minutes and talk about life, living, and loving.
And loving.
And
Good.
loving.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that if your relationships aren't right in your life, not much of anything else really matters.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, perceived by different people in different ways, and it's complex. You know, way back we talked about love in the life formula as it's the dichotomy of fear. And certainly we speak of it throughout all the essays in one form or another because it's pretty fundamental. I think there's a part of the confusion is that I think our society has kind of grasped love as sex, or certainly that's part of it. Probably one of the great disservices of for our young people is to mix that up, because you know we need that attention, that nurturance, which could be another word for love. You know, oftentimes I've looked at the life formula and I've actually considered changing the word love in the formula to nurturance, because that's contribution. And that's making adjustments to things as they occur. And so, but the word love somehow is what we're stuck with, whether we like it or not, even though the Greeks didn't have it in their language, you remember. They talked about eros, philos, and agape, and when you define those, it seems so much more clear as to really what's going on. I think probably it's hard for me to talk about love without getting a little spiritual in the fact that it's been said that God is love. And when you start putting that on it, that makes love a deity. Because if God is love, can you see where love may be a deity? That's powerful, and it needs to be examined and understood in the best possible way.
It certainly seems that we worship love, or the feelings of love, more than anything else. If you look at all the songs and the books and the movies and the art, what percentage has been inspired by love? And it was interesting something you said earlier about love being nurturance. And I know when I listen to so many songs and read poetry, they're talking about, I need you, I can't live without you, you make me complete, I love you. And it seems more to me that's, I want you to give me love instead of I love you. It's what you do for me in the songs instead of what I can do for you. So it seems to be quite a selfish act according to our modern day ideology of love, as opposed to maybe what you're talking about.
See, it wouldn't hurt to really review that a little bit, I guess, now that we're into it, is the fact that the Greeks didn't have the word love in the vocabulary, and just as a, well, not only a review, but just to examine it in this context, to examine the fact that eros is considered a form of love, and yet what it really is about, this is a natural emotional state, eros, and therefore has both love and fear in it. And because it's about possessiveness, and that's the kind of stuff that comes up in our love language. As I want you, you're mine, and my girl and my guy. And that tends, if we're not careful, to transmit itself into a position of control, possessiveness, which on the other side can create a whole lot of pain. And so it's a matter of understanding that eros can be wonderful because it's nice to have and to hold, to belong, to be exclusive, unless you don't want to be. And then it can get painful. And then, of course, jealousy gets in there. And then limerence. Remember the word limerence? Did we talk about limerence?
It's
the
been a
fact
while.
that a limerent person is one who stalks and eventually might even kill. This is very dangerous. This usually is accompanied with philos, P-H-I-L-O-S, which is about reciprocity, the bargain, the deal. I think that appears a lot in our love language. knows I love you, you love me, and this will all work out.
And as long as you give me what I want,
Yeah.
you're the object of my love. The minute you start performing, I don't love you any longer.
See, what a tragedy when there are vast, vast numbers of people out here, when you say, I love you, they wonder what you're up to.
Yeah.
What do you want out of me? That's all
Exactly.
well and good.
Yeah.
And that's too bad. And yet it's understandable when you look at it from the eros philos standpoint, because there's expectations, there's a need to control, and it's unfortunate. Now, when we're talking about love, we have to encompass, if we possibly can, agape. Agape. Okay? Agape essentially is a combination of things, all of which, as you're saying, are nurturing in many ways. Patience and kindness and courtesy and sincerity, guilelessness, remember all those? Guilelessness, and what was it? Selflessness, a good temper, and forgiveness. All wrapped around that. Now, those are all nurturing states. And when you can get there, some amazing things begin to happen. This is what I'm talking about when I say love. I wrote something here some time ago that we've had some fun with. And by the way, as we go this, if people want one of these, why, they can call us at 1-800-661-3490, and I'll get some copies run off and send this out to them if they want to examine it and maybe share it with other people. I call it the magic, mystery, and majesty of love. In other words, it's such a profound thing when you examine it and embrace it properly. One of the interesting things that everyone seems to be, well, we know that they are, everyone is born with a capacity for love. A capacity for love. Yet it's not in them. In other words, they have a capacity for it.
But it's not developed
that's
or
right.
exhibited.
That's right. Yet each person must learn how to accept it and to convey it. And if it's not conveyed to them from someone, they may not learn how to do that well. I think I was a victim of that. My father, I think I'd mentioned one time in one of the previous essays, never was able, I understand now, after all these years, but when I was a child was never able somehow to say that he loved me. Never used the words. Never touched me, not even to spank me. You know what I mean? There was none of that stuff, that nurturance of that kind that was necessary, and therefore I was non-demonstrative, non-verbal for years and years and years. I was filled with love, and it was no way of getting out, and it's terribly frustrating to have that much passion in you for someone and compassion and yet not be able to exhibit it, because what do they feel? They feel that they're unloved. You know what I mean? I can't tell you how many, especially I think young women in my life, who have professed that their daddy did not love them. And I know that's not true. Perhaps, chances are, I'm reasonably certain, that he didn't know how. He was afraid to. There was, I wish I had brought it with me, there was a delightful cartoon in a Sunday paper you might have seen, where the dad and the daughter are sitting on a couch watching television, and the dad is saying to himself, oh, I love her so, I'd love to put my arm around her, but I don't, she might misunderstand, I'm not sure I should or not. Now, he was just going through all kinds of turmoil, wanting to express his love physically, appropriately, but physically. And then the little balloon over her head in the last frame says, I wonder why Daddy doesn't love me anymore. You know what I mean? In other words, they both want to participate, but somehow in our society there's been so much inappropriateness that's been expanded, of course, through the media and what have you, that we're afraid to. They're afraid to actually extend ourselves, and that's terrible. But everyone is born with the capacity for it, yet each person must learn how to accept it and convey it. Conveying it. And it's hard to accept it, by the way. As we talked a moment ago, a lot of times people extend themselves to you, and you're uncomfortable because you oftentimes feel undeserving. Now, if our esteem has been diminished, okay, by experiences or verbalizations of other people, it's awfully hard to accept someone's love without wondering what they're up to, or to think there must be something wrong with them. Isn't that tragic? I know that there are people who, when someone expresses their love for them, wonder what's wrong with them.
For loving.
Yeah, because I'm not lovable, therefore there must be something wrong with them. This is really terrible. But it's a matter of learning how to accept it and how to convey it. Love is created by love. In other words, as we love, our love seems to grow, okay? And as we love someone, they get in touch with the love that's in them. I mean, that's pretty magical when you think about it. People won't change because of us sometimes. You know, sometimes if they're inappropriate or unkind or insensitive, and we posture and say, I wish they would change, and we set little rules, and you know, we
threaten
demand,
and cajole and nag.
and they just chisel themselves in granite. You're not going to change at all. But if we love them and forgive them and communicate that way with them, oftentimes, no promises, but as often as not, they will change for us. Not because of us, but for us, in the sense that they want to bask in that once they recognize that it's genuine. You mean, once you know someone loves you genuinely, I would think you would want to be in that company and would make adjustments in order to be there. Okay? It's not a matter of succumbing or surrendering, but making adjustments in order to appreciate and enjoy. It's a fascinating thing. Love will always overcome fear. Love will always overcome fear in proportion to its practice and conveyance. In other words, if I'm practicing love, okay, it will overcome my fear, and will oftentimes, more often than not, overcome the fear that might exist in somebody else. Powerful, powerful process. Now, love, of course.
I'm sorry, I think that was very important, what you just said about love overcoming fear. And I think a lot of times, even if it doesn't overcome the fear in the people around us, that we're willing to get out of our comfort zone and to act with love instead of fear or hostility, especially in challenging situations. What that does for us creates a whole new opening for that relationship to change.
Yes. Love empowers us in a sense, too, that we become objective when we're in that state. When we're in a fear mode, I mean, boy, we have to look out. Actually,
we're pretty irrational oftentimes.
Irrational, subjective. It's a painful place to be. But when you're out there loving and contributing, okay, there's a lot of empowerment there because you become more objective, you become conscious, you get in the moment. There's all kinds of strength that comes from that. Bonding love, you've heard of people bonding, that just occurs. That's a mystery, by the way. I don't know that there's a philosopher, and now we can understand the bonding love that might occur between a man and a woman that essentially is stimulated by the need to propagate as a biological urge, and you meet the right person and somehow those juices flow and you bond. We can understand that, but for two men or two women to truly bond, okay, and to become, I mean, lifelong friends, tolerating, enjoying one another regardless of what happens, that's a powerful force, and it just occurs. I don't know that I've ever read anything or heard anything that truly explains that. The good news is, though, that it can also be willed.
I was going to say, don't you think, even though it may not have been written down anywhere, that it's a matter of choice along the way? We make choices to continue friendships, even if there's sacrifice involved, like distance or time that we're taking from other things to spend on that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's the other end of it.
Yeah, a lot of times we choose not to continue relationships.
Exactly.
But some we do choose to continue for whatever reason, and that's what creates the bond, is the choice.
I think, though, that there's a bonding that can occur almost instantly between people. I've had a couple of people in my life that when I met them, I loved them right away. I mean, I would have tolerated hardly anything they would do, and that grew. You know what I mean? Because then I choose to continue in that. And there were other times when I was thrust into a circumstance, and by loving and, you know, contributing to and being concerned about, sometimes even for my own best interest, let's be honest about it. You know, sometimes even in loving someone and nurturing them, somehow you're satisfying your own libido, that need to continue to be that we talked about at one time. But then that becomes a genuine relationship. I notice, I might have talked some months ago about Ben Campbell, who died here some time ago. And the first time I met Ben, I mean, it was like a reaction to him rather than a bonding. In other words, this was back in the 1969. He was a hippie. He was angry. He was out to prove the world wrong. And he knew he was too. It was one of those kind of things. But I came over a period of time by coaching him and working with him and what have you. I grew to love him as much as any of my own children, and they all understood that. You know what I mean? In other words, really, really dear to me. And so that love grew through the contribution and his reciprocation. So there was some philos in there that contributed to that, and yet it never seemed to get inappropriate in any way. It's fascinating how that'll happen. Love is created by love. When we love someone who seems unlovable, Both of our loves grow. That's a wonderful thing when you think about someone who's unlovable. Way down here, I said no one needs love more than the person who has none to give. Okay, in other words, if somehow a person has just been shut down, there's been one or two, well, numbers of instances in my life when love and forgiveness was expressed and people totally broke down in a form of grief, saying it was the first time in their whole lives that they'd ever been told that. And that's tragic.
Yeah.
And their life began to change a little bit, just out of that one moment. There's a lot of magic in that when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that for myself and most of the people I know, when they're extremely upset, frustrated, hostile, even angry, and very prickly, someone you don't want to be around, that's when we the most need someone to come up and put an arm around us, give us an encouraging word, be kind. And it's a very difficult thing for others to do.
Yes.
They want to smack you, usually, or tell you to leave the room, tell you, get yourself under control. But what you do need at that time is some kindness.
And statistically, there's not many people who can do that.
Yeah.
Usually if someone is in a rage and being inappropriate, it's easy to react and become, inappropriate and in a rage.
But it's not productive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But to be able to remain objective in spite of the chaos and to remain there and then eventually embrace, pretty powerful position. Let's see, we can find love, reveal more of it, and cause it to expand in others as we exercise it in ourselves. That's a nice bit of information. The more we give, the more there is to give. It multiplies itself somehow. This is why oftentimes we have to put love in a metaphysical state. I was thinking about that today, that metaphysics is anything that can't be explained by physics. You know what I mean, by math and what have you, and certainly love is one of those things. This is why I think perhaps it's been given this deity, this awesome status in our lives, because we don't totally understand it, but we sure enjoy it, we appreciate it, and we know that we're strengthened when we get it and when we give it. So it's pretty neat. Interesting too, and I think if people would really understand this would help an awful lot of hearts, is to not have all of one's love. To not have all of one's love is not to be denied any of it. Some people seem to want exclusive rights to someone's love. They want to be the only one who's loved. You know how that feels. There's that exclusivity that's necessary. Now, remember, we're talking about love. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about passion. Okay? But to not have all of one's love is not to be denied any of it. Children need to understand that. And I think many do. The fact that you can love every child and each child's love is not diminished by that. I mean, that's magical. It's a majestic factor there.
I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier about to have love is to multiply it. The more you give, the more there is to give. But so often it seems like we tell people that we love them, or we show them that we love them on a conditional basis instead of an unconditional basis. Right. I love you, you are lovable if you perform a certain way.
That's when Eros Philos creeps in.
Right. And that's so prevalent. I think it's very difficult for people to separate the two. And that we become needy because we're not ever getting the real thing. We're just getting substitutes instead of the real thing, which is pure generosity.
This is one of the reasons I would urge people to call in this 1-800-661-3490, Life Talk, to call in and just let us know you've been watching the show. We'll send you one of these and a couple of tickets to a essay that's coming up soon called The Life Formula. People need to see that because we lay it out in such a way that people are able to grasp right away and become objective about this very issue. Because I can't even imagine. I look back on my life before I had the tool to use, and my life was in chaos. I didn't have the tools to develop and establish and maintain relationships and what have you. I was hurt oftentimes, I mean, like most people, you know what I mean? But once developing that formula, everything smoothed out. It's just fascinating. I don't feel deprived of anyone's love. I can be away from people for a long, long time and still feel the essence of them and not feel lonely about that. It's just a very peaceful thing. And so I would urge anyone to either get over there and be our guest. We're not trying to sell them anything, but to come and be our guest to see Life Formula and begin to satisfy a lot of these things and understand it more.
Yeah, I think it would be a wonderful idea, and I know we've discussed some of the elements of Life Formula on the program, but for people who may have seen those shows, it in no way covers all the material that we go over in the seminar, and it's such a different thing to be there in person and to partake in the activities and the understanding that comes about from that experience.
People consistently say there's a synergy when you come to a live event. You know what I mean? In other words, there's something that happens there, there's no question.
And it's always unique depending on the group of people that you have.
Now, I know we cover a lot of material here on the show, but it takes us weeks to get through what you can perceive in 2 hours. I mean, actually, it took us 5 weeks to cover the Life Formula on the air, and in 2 hours you got it, okay? And that's important. Love endures. Death occurs, and the love that was part of that person's essence continues and combines with all the love that exists, causing it to grow. I've watched this now for half a century, and I see each decade getting stronger and stronger in this capacity. I mean, I'm so optimistic about the future. It's kind of like there's a love pool out there that with each generation, it seems to get richer and deeper, and we have more access to it, and there's an omnipotence and omnipresence in it that's really awesome. I think that's really might have been what was intended in the beginning when they said God is love, because it just, I believe that if we endure, and I believe we will because it's our nature to adapt and to make it through, that whether it be in the next millennium or what, it's going to be some place. I mean, this could be heaven-like when we really understand that and cross over the barriers that have been developed by fear, you know, like prejudice and racism and generalizations and all this kind of thing.
Could we take just a minute, since you're talking about this, a thought occurred to me, and maybe outline some of the things that would have to happen in order for that kind of a world to exist, or that kind of a community to exist? What kind of behaviors would people have to engage in to have that kind of nirvana or peaceful existence?
I think one thing is somehow we've got to start teaching young children, who, by the way, can understand, because I remember conveying some of these things to David, my grandson, and he seemed to be getting it, and there are moments in his life where he exhibits it. I know I have other grandchildren who are being brought up in a love environment. I mean, minimum amount of fear and upset, and they have a broad capacity. But to start with children, to compartmentalize it, bring people into the moment, because most of our tragedy and upset and hurt is in the future and the past. I mean, to practice people get really fascinated by and focused on individual moments predeterminedly, give them the tools to use. I'm prejudiced about the Life Formula, but to be able to talk about it in a different way and then become conscious. In other words, to acknowledge our trichotomy, to know that we have a subconscious mind left unattended will lead us to inappropriate behavior. In other words, we mentioned here a couple of 3 weeks ago, we're not colorblind. But until we get a conscious mind developed to the point where we know that color, okay, brown, red, black, and white, is a protoplasmic thing. It has nothing, in other words, it has to do with centuries and centuries in certain climes. You know what I mean? In other words, this is what's created a lot of that. And to recognize that underneath that protoplasmic surface is a mind that's identical to ours, has all the same functions, and to really understand that and to talk a lot about it. I think it's not inappropriate to mention that President Clinton here not too long ago appealed to the nation to start talking about this. And some people are somewhat cynical. They say, well, sure, we've been talking. But, I mean, this whole thing is easier said than done. But remember, we said the other day, it doesn't get done until it's said. To just talk and talk and talk with each other, about each other in a favorable, loving way can break down those barriers. I've seen it happen before, it can happen again. Because love will overcome fear. I mean, and when you're talking about it, it grows. When you're exhibiting it, it grows. And when you're thinking about it, it grows. When you're receiving it, it grows. And that's pretty exciting. There was one thing in here. It is always there for those who experienced it and accessible to everyone that seeks it. God has been said to be love, therefore love must be God, hence God is within us as we love. In proportion to the love that's in us, God seems to be in our lives and becomes one with itself, one with God when we die. Okay, that's what I'm talking about, that love pool. A little complex, but I think people are grasping. There is much joy in this. I mean, once you begin to think about this, there's much joy in it once it's intellectually and emotionally grasped. Fun stuff. No one lead. I think we've done most of these now. But I think just talking about it, I know we've already discussed it a lot on the various shows, but this doesn't hurt. And we're running out of time, but is there anything else that you want to delve into here?
Well, I think it's really interesting, again, to go back to the different kinds of love, and how often, I think, during the course of a day do we stop and ask ourselves, am I loving to get something, or am I loving to serve someone? And I think part of loving to serve is also being willing to overlook so much that we certainly don't want other people to point out in us when we make
patient.
Absolutely. And I think that comes also with the tolerance, and I think love also is an appreciation of diversity instead of being afraid of or disliking because it's different. And it's so easy to say, oh, they don't do it the right way, or they do this or they do that, or I don't like. Couldn't we just turn around and say, oh, I love that they are different?
One thing I want to say, too, that you've got to understand that down here, agape, this kind of love that we're talking about is volitional. No, it's not a natural state. It's a supra-natural state.
It's a constant choice.
That's right. It's a commitment to love. And practicing that all the time is what causes it to grow. Gina, this went by too quickly. This is Life Talk. We talk about life and living and making a living, and tonight it was life, living and loving. Thank you, Gina. My name is Vern. You got it?
Thank you, Vern.